I just wanted to make a quick video, and we may be interrupted, we'll do our best, about table fables. Now, I mentioned these in one of my recent videos, but I've been using this one because I'm creating an adventure to run for a group of people in October using white box rules and the setting of Into the Weird and Wild. Now, in this book, it tells you in creating your wilderness dungeon to use this map, and it's basically a hex grid. And what you do is you roll a d8, just to cover it briefly. That's a 4. So you take that amount of d6s and you drop it onto a map like this. Now, oftentimes the dice will just hit each other and fly off the table. So, luckily, I have a dice tray of a similar shape. So I just transpose those positions onto a map, and that's what I did with the original one. So I'm using this map for my group adventure. Now, sometimes the trouble is that with an infinite range of possibilities, you end up not being able to come up with any ideas, which is what happens to me a lot. So I used the wilderness encounters to draw up what would happen in each location, and sometimes they would correlate with some of the things in here, so I could tie it together nicely, or I could just think, oh, they've had an NPC encounter or a mysterious encounter, they can have some monsters now, so I'll pick some monsters out of here. But it was really useful in placing some interesting encounters throughout the map using the wilderness tables, which I used in my video where we found the golem, the flesh golem, who had lost its master, for instance, in the 3rd edition video I did. So the Table Fables 2 is really useful for so many things like that, which I covered in that video. But I also decided to get Table Fables 1. Now, the main reason why is because I play Dungeon Crawl Classics in a group, and you start off with, say, 4 or so characters in a funnel adventure, and maybe one of them will survive, and they will become your level 1 character. And the trouble is, I've been struggling to pin any kind of personality onto my Dungeon Crawl Classics characters, whereas when I play one-shots in 5th edition at a local game store, I print off pre-made characters from the digital Dungeon Masters, because you can pick the level you need for the game, and it gives you quite a bit of personality already. But with Dungeon Crawl Classics, I'm finding it difficult, and with my solo RPGs, the characters don't really have much personality to hang on to, and it's just sometimes nice to have a little hook to sort of pin down what kind of person they are. Now, I've looked at some other books of random tables on Amazon Drive-Thru RPG where you can see a preview of the book, and they seem to have an awful lot of introductory pages before you actually get to the tables. Now, we may have noise in the background at this point because someone is doing building work at 9:15 in the evening, because that's the way life is these days. Now, we have Table Fables, the introductory page here. We have a foreword. We have a introduction here. Sorry about the focus, it's quite dark. And then we're into the tables, basically. We're straight in. So these are for a good mix of perhaps NPCs or something. But you can use these sorts of charts from here on in as helpful things to hang your character on. So in this we've got character traits. So if I roll on those, So we got a 66. And that's presumptuous. Okay. Well, that's a bit different. We are presumptuous. And we may have other quirks. Let's have a look at that in a second. Okay, so we'll try this table. 13. Fear of spiders and creeping insects. Well, that's fair enough. And we could roll for a character background. So 95. Oops, excuse me, it's a d20. I do apologise. It's been that kind of day. 8. You are a hardened and experienced bounty hunter making a living by taking lives. You are accustomed to the frightened looks and stony stares you receive wherever you go. Well, that's kind of appropriate for my fighter here. Now there are a lot more useful tables to flesh out your character, and that's sort of the main focus of this book compared to the other one, which is more of a world building thing. So I found these both really useful because sometimes when the sky's the limit, it's difficult to know how to get off the ground. But these books are just crammed full of really good ideas, and there's not much guff and empty pages like other books, and these are a nice little size and a good price. I've really found them useful, and so I may use this one, for instance, to work through some character traits of my solo role-playing characters. I mean, sometimes you can just start with a few random things and then your own ideas will sort of knit together and start to make sense of it all. But sometimes it's just nice to have a bit of a leg up, a bit of a head start to start your ideas going. And I found these two books really useful so far. Now, as I've mentioned that I'm running a group game next month, I want to use Yarrowin's Haven from Into the Weird and Wild in the group adventure, so I'm wondering how to resolve the story of the Dragon's Heart. So I'm going to roll the Fantasia dice, which aren't a set I've used yet, and we'll see if they come up with anything interesting. Yeah, this isn't telling me anything really, so I'm going to tell you what I've been thinking about the story. Okay, let's try and get this link recorded. Despite the building work that's going on at 9:10 now, the head of Leah's community tasked her with finding the heart of the dragon because Yarrowin the dragon was seen as a threat in the Weird and Wild by the Lady of Broken Branches, who had infiltrated Leah's community. And so she'd sort of taken over the head of Leah's place where she lived, and she had then become jealous of Yarrowin and wanted to seek out a way to defeat her. But thanks to the flesh golem and the guy who created the flesh golem, who was actually a magic user and not a necromancer, because flesh golems aren't undead, they are elemental, so they're created by magic users, apparently. He was able to impart to Leah the truth of the matter, and Leah met Yarrowin and was able to see the light, as it were, and to see that her own community had been infiltrated. And the idea was to have a massive battle between the forces of Yarrowin, with her magic user and flesh golem friends, and Leah fighting against the forces of the Lady of Broken Branches, who had infiltrated Leah's community. But I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that yet. And by the way, just thought I'd mention, I went ahead and got this, a print-on-demand copy, because it's substantially cheaper than a second-hand copy of the original, and probably smells better. which also has a mass combat system. We'll see how that works out and finishes off Leah's story before we deal with any of her companions. Thank you for watching.